Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ikra and today is Teacher Talk Tuesday. I'm standing up for this one. I'm feeling a little bit different. And today's topic is all about a work-life balance as a teacher, and particularly having work-life balance as a newlywed. I've just popped my notes on here, like 5 sort of things that I did, and try not to move around too much. And I have stood to the side for a reason, because if I have anything else to add, it's a nice blank screen for you guys to be able to read from. The first thing I will say is that my NQT year, I'd completed that before I got married, so the stress of that year, and especially the stress of a training year, that was a lot more stressful for me than my NQT year. Those were handled when I was single, when I was living with my family, when I didn't have the responsibilities of being married. So for those of you guys who are going through either of those 2 years and you just got married, hats off to you, mashallah, you're amazing and you have got this and it will be okay. You just need to try and figure out that balance. My second year into teaching, so my RQT year, that was last year, I started off a year obviously in September, unmarried, and then I was planning the wedding in this time though. So for the first term I was planning my wedding at the same time as teaching year 6 as well. And then in December I got married in Christmas holidays, and so from the Christmas holidays basically till the end of that school year I was a married RQT, and so my perception of work-life balance had to completely shift, because when you get married, especially when you're like an Asian or like a Muslim person who wasn't previously living with their significant other and now you are, and everything's changed, everything's different, you have to like realize and recognize that your priorities are no longer the same anymore. I don't know how true that is for other cultures or other situations, but certainly when you are suddenly moving in together once you got married, your life does kind of completely flip and change, and that's something that it's hard to embrace in a way, but you kind of have to embrace it, because those first 6, 7, 8, first year of your marriage is so critical. And a lot of people say that the first year of marriage is the hardest. I'm at month 10 now, alhamdulillah, and I can say that obviously I can't say it's the hardest because we've not gone past 10 months, but I can say it's hard. It's very difficult because of various reasons, which I'll get into another video if you guys want that. But in terms of actually like maintaining a life-work balance, first of all getting a work-life balance and then maintaining it, the first thing that I did was I stopped bringing back so much work to do at home, because quite frankly I would bring back bags of books and they would just lie untouched at the front of our apartment, and I would pick them up again the next morning, take them back into school, and it was just becoming a bit of a backache and a bit of a workout, and I just was too exhausted from the whole school day to then go back, either have dinner with my parents or sort out dinner with my husband and then sit and mark for hours on end. It just was not doable. So that's kind of the first thing that I did. It wasn't something I did straight away, but I would say that's the most, from all of these tips and all of these points I'm going to make, that was the most significant change that I made from my NQT to my RQT. I brought back home books way less, and I only really brought them when I had to bring them back, when there was like a writing moderation, for example, or when it came to the end of year and we were having to mark through and assess our year 6s and see what level they were at. Obviously then I had to do work at home. There was absolutely no way that I could do all that work in my PPA time and after school. But in terms of from Monday to Friday, I really tried to limit the amount of times I'd bring books home to mark. Number 2, I definitely worked a lot smarter in my lunch breaks. I would go and eat my lunch a lot quicker than I would in my NQT year, and then I would give myself time to have a rest. Usually I would eat with one of my colleagues, and then we would also sit with the children and eat. And then I would probably give myself 10 minutes to just relax and sort of unwind, and then I would get on to doing work. And I found that I got so much more done than I expected in my lunch break, because it's one of those times where generally the classroom is totally quiet. You're in your classroom, so you can get things done like that around the room, like sorting out displays or tidying up and organising yourself. And it's something that I really did not do much in my NQT year at all, which, I mean, I'm not going to say I regret it, because this is all a learning curve, but if I could go back, I would have been a bit smarter in my NQT year, and I would have just made more use out of that whole hour that we had for lunch. Well, ours was like 50 minutes, but yeah, still pretty much an hour. You don't have to spend that whole time off. Now, that's not to say that you should never like take off a whole lunch break to yourself, or go and sit in the staff room for the whole lunch break. And I know it's like there's quite a few teachers who did do that, because they were like, this is my time where I'm away from the classroom, because I've been in that space the whole morning, I'm going to be in that space the whole of tomorrow, so I need to be basically just in adult company in the staff room, which is what the staff room is there for. And that is completely understandable. But for me, in terms of managing the balance of my workload, I found that getting as much done as I could that's within the classroom in my lunch break just made me feel a lot more positive by the time it came to the end of the school day, because I knew that I'd use that time wisely, and I knew I had a little bit less to do after school, because usually after school you are bombarded with meetings, with things to do, and you're bombarded with marking and planning, etc, etc. There's always something to be done after school. The more you can fit into your lunch break comfortably, still allowing yourself to have a break, the better it'll be for you, basically. The third thing, I had to really train myself to do it. And again, this is something that I would say I only really managed to like maybe 4 months into my marriage, whilst I was also working, was training myself when to switch off. And my parents will tell you, if you were ever to meet them, that when I was training and when I was doing my NQT year, I would spend a lot of time when I came home talking to them about my day, because I'd feel like I had so much to offload, so much to talk about, so much to share. And then naturally, like when I went from living with my parents to then living with my husband, and he would pick me up from work, I would offload to him. But I quickly realised that, first of all, he's not used to it. This is not something he's used to. And secondly, I was spending a disproportionate amount of time speaking about work. So if we count the hours that we had together from between after work till we went to sleep at night, it's not a lot of time. When you're working full time, you don't have a lot of downtime to spend with your family, and it kind of took me a while to realise that time that I do have is really precious. And spending the whole time just talking about work, talking about what I have to do, and this happened, and say that happened, and just really going through my day in an enormous amount of detail, it actually wasn't that beneficial to Bogor, and it wasn't that beneficial to our relationship. So for me, I just think that it took me a while, and sometimes I'm sure I still do this, where I just talk loads and loads and loads, but I do think that it's important to know when to switch off from school mode, and it's very hard to do as a teacher. I'm telling you, I know it is extremely hard to just be able to switch off, but training yourself to switch off as much as possible is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. And there are loads and loads of tips and websites out there that help you to do that, so I'll leave some of them down below. And yeah, just remembering that yes, your job is a very important part of your life, but it's not your whole life. Right, the fourth thing that I learned to do, and this is a tip that I was given, well, it wasn't really a tip, but I mean, one of my mum's cousins, my auntie, she's actually a head teacher in a school in East London, mashallah. So she has had a lot of teaching experience, she's had a lot of managing experience. And the first thing she said to me when she heard that I was going to train to be a teacher, going for my NQT year, my training year, my PGCE, she said that teaching is not an easy job. There's no way that anyone can say that yes, it's such an easy job and you get loads of holidays, etc, etc. But she said that you do learn to cut the right corners to make it manageable. So I really didn't understand what that meant when I was training. I didn't understand what that meant in my NQT year. But then when I got to my RQT year, I could see what she meant to some extent. Now, she didn't tell me which corners to cut. She said that's something you're going to learn and pick up yourself, depending on your classroom and the children you're teaching. But for example, something that I did was with the children's maths lessons, in my NQT year, I would teach right up until the last 5 minutes. Then I would have a quick plenary just to have and do a little bit of assessing just to see how they had understood it, using thumbs up, wobbly thumbs, thumbs down. But then I would leave it at that, and then at the end of the day I would go through every single child's book and mark their books. Now, as you can imagine, that started taking up a lot of my time, and it clicked to me. I don't know if someone told me to do this, or I don't know, I think I observed this actually when I was observing a much more experienced colleague. But if you stop 10 minutes before the end of a lesson, you can get them all to sort of wind down. You can then ask them to pick up I just let them use a colouring pencil. It wasn't important to me what colour it was, if it was green or purple or whatever, but you can have actual marking pens if you want the books to look super, super neat and pristine. And that's something that's very important to you or your school. You can definitely get a set of all matching marking pens for the children. But anyway, I would just let them use a colouring pencil, make sure they're all listening, and then we'd go through the answers. First of all, it cut down my marking time by, I'd say, 4/5. Honestly, it was insane. The amount of time that I'd gained from getting them to mark their own books at the end of the lesson was incredible. But even more importantly than that, it actually allowed the children to assess themselves how they're feeling about that particular topic. So if, for example, child A had done the whole of section 1 and done the whole of section 2 and had got them all correct, they'd be feeling pretty confident and good about themselves. Yeah, I understand this, I've got this, because look, I got them all right and I've got my feedback straight away. I didn't even have to wait until the next day to see how I did yesterday. And then, for example, if child B, if they had only got halfway through section 1 and they'd had half of them wrong and they obviously had struggled, they would be very aware that actually this is a subject that I'm not too confident with. And this is what I mean is that this doesn't work for all children. If you did this maybe with year 2s, it probably wouldn't work as well. But for year 6s, they definitely have that clear understanding of if they've grasped a subject or not. And then what I would do with that information, so once they've marked their books, and obviously I will have a good idea of who's understood and where everyone's at, because I'm walking around and talking to different groups of children, and then I'm sitting with a focused group usually. But then what that does is it allows them to self-assess, have a self-understanding, self-awareness. And then when I asked them to put their book in the appropriate place, I printed out 3 Bitmojis of me, and one is just I understand, it's a thumbs up, and I laminated that, and that's on one side of the classroom. So if they're really confident and they're happy with their work, their books go over there. And then if they are not really sure, or they didn't really get it, sorry, I had two Bitmojis, and they're either they got it or they didn't. They got it or they really weren't sure, or they got it or they aren't quite sure, but maybe could have a bit more support but kind of have a good idea as well. Then they'd go into the, I don't know, I'm not sure about this kind of emoji. So their books would go on that side. And straight away, just by seeing the number of books on each side, I could judge and assess whether the class as a whole has grasped the concept well. If they haven't grasped it well, if there's loads of children on the I'm not sure side, which alhamdulillah there really wasn't very often, but then that would mean that I need to now stop the plan for the rest of the week and put another lesson in somewhere, whether that is tomorrow's maths lesson or whether that is a half an hour slot after lunchtime that I can quickly grasp and use that as a teaching point. I need to go over this again with them because they've not understood it. On the flip side, if it is a case that 90% or 80% or 70% of the children have really understood something, but then you've got that group of children who haven't, I will then go through their books individually, see where they've gone wrong, see, how far off than what they are. A lot of the times they weren't listening, so they hadn't got hardly anything at all, which is always a bit frustrating as a teacher. But there's various reasons as to why children are not listening, and it's definitely not always because they can't be bothered. There is a bit of that in year 6, but it's definitely not always because of that. So anyway, that just made me really aware, and then on my distance marking sheet I would highlight those children for that day of who I need to then check in with at some point. And that was part of our marking policy as a school anyway, was to do distance marking and to have a spreadsheet on your computer or one that you printed out, and just to show you which children you flagged up from that lesson. And I found that it was such a helpful way for me and the children. So to cut a very long point short, working smarter in the classroom saved me so much time, but it also improved my ability to teach, because then the next day I was able to round up the children who really struggled with it for whatever reason, and I was able to work with them on a much more smaller, almost like a tutor basis, whilst the other children enhanced their knowledge on that topic by moving on something a little bit harder. So I found that made the biggest difference, and I was so much more confident teaching maths last year than I was the year before. One, because I knew that in the second year I'd been there, done that, I'd taught all these topics before, and if I needed guidance, obviously, like, I had my head of year right next door, I had so many resources available, but I just knew that I could do it. And number two, because I knew that me and my class were on the same page, we understood, and we had a really good system going with our maths lessons, especially. So yeah, just there's little things that you're going to pick up to help you work smarter in the classroom. I'm sure there are blog posts and articles out there which have much more information on how to work smarter in the classroom, so definitely go check those out. If I can find any, I'll link them down below. But yeah, really learning how to make the most out of your time in the classroom and when you're in school, that's, I think, the key to ever having a work-life balance as a teacher. Otherwise you can just kiss goodbye to it, because as a teacher, quite honestly, there is never going to be a time when you have done every single thing that you need to do. There's never going to be a time when you don't have an email to answer, or you don't have a set of books to mark, or you don't have something to think about in the future. There's constantly things coming up on a day-to-day basis, on an hourly basis. Okay, and then the final thing, I know this video has become a little bit longer than I had hoped, but the final thing is to schedule time for your spouse doing something that's totally removed from work. And this does not have to be like on the weekend only. You need to set yourself time to just have quality time with your other half, and during that quality time, whether it's going to cinema, whether it's going for a meal out, whether it's one of you cooking a really nice fancy different meal at home, whether it's going bowling, whatever it is that you're choosing to do, like during your date night, you are not talking about work unless you really, really, really have to, but just try not to. Talk about other things, because there is more to life than work. And I know, again, as teachers, our jobs do become our lives. We do get really, really invested in our job. I don't think you can be a really good teacher and not be invested in it, to be honest. But there has to be a balance, and you have to create that balance. And whether that means taking a bit longer to reply to emails, whether that means saying no now and again, whether that means prioritizing yourself, your mental health, and your spouse and family over the mountain of workload that you've got going on now and again, those are all valid things to do. Those are all things that we should be doing as teachers, because quite frankly, we do not get paid the amount that we deserve for the amount of hours and effort and time we put into the job, and the amount of pressure that's put on us being in this job, being that it's now become very assessment focused, and then we don't get the credit we deserve for everything else we do apart from teach. Teaching is just one very key but also not primary role to the job. There's so many other things to the job. I really hope that this video has been helpful to some of you out there who are hoping to get a bit of a work-life balance. If you've got any tips yourself, then definitely leave them down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit thumbs up for another Teacher Talk Tuesday next week. Make sure you click subscribe so you don't miss out, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.